Do you think this is like the perfect time for international listeners to come and work in Japan?
Yes, everybody please come. We need you.
Okay.
We need you like now.
Okay.
Please come.
Why?
I think omotenashi is best described as like Japanese style hospitality, right? But the hospitality in Japan is a waiting hospitality. It's a silent hospitality.
So Ruth Marie Jarman, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you run a company in Japan.
I do.
Jarman International.
Yes, I do.
And you have been in Japan since 1988.
I know. So long.
How's your life in Japan?
I love it.
You love it?
I mean, if I didn't like it, I wouldn't be here, right? So, you know, it's everyone goes through the phases. The first couple years are like a honeymoon, right? And then the next couple years are like, what? And then you finally start to understand you don't know very much. And then you just consider every day a learning experience. And it gets really fun.
So you were born in North Carolina, grew up in Hawaii,
Yes.
and you graduated Tufts from Boston.
Yes.
You came to Japan. Why did you decide to stay in Japan and even do a business in Japan?
Yeah, well, the reason I came to Japan is I thought that because I'm from Hawaii, so we have a good relationship with Japan from a long time ago. So I always
Definitely.
loved Japan. And then when I was in college, I went to have breakfast one morning, and I opened up the university newspaper. And I opened up the newspaper, and on the bottom right-hand side, in hiragana, in Japanese, all hiragana, so all like alphabet, it said, これを読むことができましたら説明会に来てください. If you can read this, please come to our interview.
Okay. And you were able to read that?
Yeah, because I had spent 1 year in Nagoya at Nanzan University. So I could read the basic Japanese, and I'm like, I can read that. So I went, and I just thought, oh my gosh, that is such a creative way of connecting with people. So that was my first introduction to Japan is cool. Japan is interesting, right? And then I was at a company called Recruit. We went through a huge challenge called the Recruit Scandal. And I saw how Japanese people respond to difficult situations. And I thought that was really admirable.
Why?
I felt like instead of thinking of themselves, I mean, this is just my opinion. Instead of thinking of themselves and feeling like, oh, I'm going to quit the company because it's in trouble, it was more like, okay, how do we protect our customers?
It was like the biggest corporate scandal in Japanese history, but they thought about the customers.
Yeah, I mean, at least all the people around me, I was in the head office, general affairs department, and I really felt like in times of trial, and I've seen it many times with like natural disasters and stuff, it's kind of like in times of trial, Japanese people come together and they figure out, and it happens in Hawaii too, but I really felt it strongly. And I admired that a lot, and I thought it matched my way of thinking. And so I think that partway through, in 2011, there was a huge earthquake and nuclear challenge in Japan. So at that time, I think a lot of us who were living here sort of had to decide, you know, do we want to stay? Do we want to go? I got divorced and stuff too. So there are these moments along the way where you sort of think, okay, am I here for the long haul, or, you know, what do I want to do? And I think that my very conscious decision was at that time that I thought, you know, there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of issues, but I love the challenge of living in Japan, and I love Japan, and I love Japanese people, so I'm going to stay.
Do you think Japanese corporate culture is very different from those of the United States or Europe or anything, any place?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question because I've actually never worked in a non-Japanese company.
Okay.
But I've interacted
Right.
with many non-Japanese companies, right? And yes, I think there's one huge difference. Do you want to know what it is?
Yes. What is it?
I feel like most of the companies that are not Japanese that I work with have a hard time believing the Japanese situation. So they'll say, look, on paper, it makes total sense. Like, this company needs us, we have money to give them, you know, we're ready to invest in them. It totally makes sense. But the Japanese company is saying no. Why? So I think that there's like a lot of, if you say it in a negative way, like illogical parts of it. But if you say it in a positive way, it's like very relationship based. A lot of stuff is based on trust. A lot of stuff is based on very long-term relationships. And so Yeah, it can be very, very befuddling. I think that's the word used. I think it can be very confusing to a lot of businesses that try to come into Japan.
But once you understand the kind of the hidden rules, is that comfortable for you?
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's why you have to use people on site. And they can't all be like me. They have to be like you too. Like, you have to use Japanese people. Just because you have an international person who's like advocating for you, it doesn't matter. It has to be a Japanese person to interact with the local company heads. So yeah, there's a lot of little things that you have to know. I would say the biggest one is long-term view. So I usually say, like, if a business is trying to get into the Japanese market, you have to prepare to spend about 250,000 US dollars and spend at least 5 years building it. And you have to have somebody who can make decisions on the ground.
So I have been covering the Japanese business for a long time. I believe this is like the pivotal moment. We're in a radical change.
Yeah.
Number one is because the tourists flocking into Japan.
Yeah.
We have a graph here, but there's like almost 30 million people are coming.
Yeah.
And also the stock prices are rocket high.
Yes.
Do you think this is like the perfect time for international listeners who are listening to the podcast to come and work in Japan?
Yes, everybody please come. We need you.
Okay.
We need you like now.
Okay.
Please come.
Why?
So I feel like what you just said, that we've always heard that Japan is very weak when it comes to outside pressure.
True.
There is so much outside pressure right now.
Okay.
Like, why is your stock so low? You know, why is your PBR under 1%? You know, why don't you have enough people to work? Like, all these different kinds of pressures are happening at the perfect moment. And I love your use of the word pivot. This is a pivoting moment. This podcast is pivot too, right?
Yes.
Because a pivot is strategic. A pivot is not just a change, it's a strategic change. It's to go a different direction with good strategy. And I really feel like all the Japanese companies I work with, they are ready to do it. Because there's so much pressure coming in, they're ready to do it, they want to do it, but they don't really know how to do it. So they need those international partners, whether people that will work with them, whether new customers that will come and ask for different things, whether investors from overseas. Yeah, so the international presence in Japan is growing, so everybody can come and join.
So you sit in the board of Kadokawa, which is like a publishing / entertainment,
Game, anime, they do lots
company.
of stuff, yeah.
How is that? Do you think that Japanese companies are changing and starting to welcome foreigners as board members?
100%.
100%.
Because the Japanese upper management is changing in age. There's a generational change happening. I'm not saying that the other older ones were bad in any way at all. And I love the legacy leadership because they know how to protect the Japanese style of doing things, which is also really good. But now you have people who are just the next echelon down. So like, let's say, probably, I guess people a little like my age or a little bit older are now leading these companies. And they're much more open-minded. They're much more in touch with the gemba that we call in Japan. So the on the ground people.
Okay.
On the ground people are like the people that are interacting with the clients. They, like at Kadokawa, just as an example, Mr. Natsuno, who's the shacho there, he has one-on-one meetings with the employees all the time. You know, somebody else is there with him to make sure that what he says is, on point and everything. But he really tries to interact with people on a one-to-one basis and figure out where is the market going, what are the customers asking for. And I feel like that's very more common than it was. So the Japanese CEOs are much more willing to listen to the employees on the front lines as well as to the customer. It's not, well, we've always been doing it this way. This is the way that works for us. We're not going to change. It's more like, okay, we're going to have 40% of our revenue coming from overseas. So we better start figuring out overseas, right?
Yeah. To give our audience context, Natsuno-san, you mentioned, the CEO of Kadokawa, he invented iMode, which was like basically maybe iPhone and app, more advanced than iPhone, So he was like an entrepreneur back then.
So, I mean, the thing that I love about all the CEOs that I interact with is that they're very concerned with the details. They're not just concerned with the macro view. They're very concerned with the details. So we had one comment the other day when there was some kind of document in the meeting where it had a person's name and then kakko and their age, like parentheses in the age, which is what it always happens, right? And the CEO at that time pointed out, he said, why do we have to put people's age? Let's take that out. That's really good.
Yes.
It's a very small detail, but it makes a big change.
It's awkward because when you read the newspapers, there's always a parentheses and an age when people are quoted. Yeah.
I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad, and there's a sense of hierarchy in Japan.
Right.
There's a sense of camaraderie when somebody's the same age as you. So, I mean, it's not 100% bad, but on an official document, like, why do we need it?
True.
Let's make a decision. Just because we've been doing it like that from now, for the past, why do we have to continue doing it like that?
Some people argue that since maybe Walkman, Japan has not invented anything, iPhone. What do you think about their opinion?
I don't agree with that at all. No. I think that it's a very long conversation. Do we have like 5 hours to talk?
Maybe 5 minutes, if that's possible. Yeah.
I think that Japan goes for this strategy called the aggregate niche strategy. There's a book called The Reinvention of Japanese Business or something like that. She's basically saying that you open up your iPhone and 70% of the little parts inside are made by Japan. And we saw that happen in 2011 with the earthquake. One line, so one assembly line in Tohoku, in the northeastern side of Japan, stops, and like in 6 months, the entire world's assembly lines on several different car manufacturers is going to stop. So I feel like, and Fujibo is also a really, really good example of this. What they did is they used to make like clothing.
Yes.
That was their main thing. But then they evolved. So the same thing's happening with Fujifilm, all these different places.
Right.
They evolved and they used their existing technology. Now what they do is they have like 70% of the world market of soft pads to polish semiconductor chips.
I didn't know that.
It's so cool. So it's a really high-tech thing. You have a soft pad and you have a hard pad. And it's part of the process of making a semiconductor chip. And you have to like polish them perfectly. It's like really high-tech. And so Fujibo, this Japanese company, has a majority share of the soft pad market worldwide. So that's where I see like the strength of Japan, which isn't necessarily obvious from the outside looking in. You really have to get in.
So it's on inside, like this iPad.
Yeah.
It's full of Japanese technology and all.
Yeah, and
materials.
the thing that I love about Japan is because it's a team-based situation and there's consensus, a lot of consensus-based decision-making that happens. The evolution of products is so small that you don't notice it until like 5 years later. So 5 years later, 10 years later, you open it up and you realize, oh my gosh, it's almost all Japanese products, because little by little along the way, they've been improving and becoming the best, the best, the best, the best. And so the whole world will now choose that product, right?
I used to live in the Bay Area, and they all say disrupt something. But in Japan, I feel that there were like 100-year-old companies in Kyoto and everywhere. For instance, Nintendo used to be like a playing cards company, and now they create games.
Yes.
Do you think Japanese companies are good at changing themselves, transforming themselves?
I agree. Yes, I agree with you. I would say it wouldn't be called disruption in Japan, because disruption wouldn't match the Japanese aesthetic, right?
No, it's kind of rude, not against ethics. I don't know, but yeah, what do you think? Yeah.
I mean, disruption's good.
Yes.
Like, I think that, wasn't it Mark Zuckerberg said, like, you have to break it first or something
move
like
fast,
that?
break it.
Yeah,
something
like that. But in the Japanese style, it's more like you're watching something and you're thinking, wait a minute, how do you guys think? What do you think if we, like, switch this number over here? And then everybody's like, oh, okay, let's think of the demerits and merits of that. So I feel like it's not really disruption, it's more like constant improvement. And the reason, and this is also in my book, but the reason that I believe that that happens is because Japanese culture really values humility and not acting like you know. Like, I think we have a pidgin English word in Hawaii for it. It's
What
like,
is it?
what is it? It's like, well, in English, generally you would say like a know-it-all.
Yeah.
Like somebody who feels like they know. And so that's very much looked down upon in Japan, right? So it's really like a strong value to remain humble, to always feel like you're learning, to always feel like you could improve. Like, just, compliment any Japanese person. And they will say, oh, no.
No, we're not good enough.
No, we're not good enough. We're not good. Try. Like, anybody should try that. And I feel like that is what leads to this constant improvement that Japanese companies are able to achieve, because no one ever thinks, okay, now we're going to relax and we're just going to be fine. Nobody does that. And the whole idea of having a proper sense of like nervousness in Japan, tekisetsu ne kinchoukan, right? Proper sense of nervousness, feeling nervous about stuff, and not relaxing, not, what is it called, leaning on your laurels, like sitting back on your laurels, or like, you know, like deciding, okay, we're running well, so now we can just take a break. That rarely happens here.
Do you think there are huge opportunities for people outside Japan to work in Japan, such as engineers or outside directors? Or what types of professionals are the Japanese companies looking for?
I think the Japanese company is looking for people that are also humble. It doesn't matter what level. They want people to come and join who will be like, yeah, let me first figure out what you're trying to do and see how I can help you. So one of the things that I learned when I was at Space Design, which is a real estate firm, they brought in a CFO from outside, a Japanese guy. And he literally, during the meetings, didn't say anything for like a year. And I was like, why are you not? And he would basically talk to the CEO after the meetings are done.
That's so typical Japanese.
But he just spent the whole first year trying to figure out this business. And that's something that I love about any kind of Japanese business, or basically any Japanese pursuit. You are not expected to know it right from day one. They want you to really understand their style, understand what they're trying to do, the goals. And once you understand things, then you can start, you know, making a comment here and there, right? So the thing that I love, and I really can recommend to anybody around the world, is that if you do come to Japan to work, you are not expected to have immediate success. No one is expecting that. So come with a humble attitude, come with a willingness to learn, come with an open mind, and this can be the most interesting, exciting place to work in the world.
Interesting. Maybe in the US, if you don't speak in a meeting for a year, it's like nothing to you. You're invisible, but that is very different in Japan.
It is. Like in the US, when we go to college, if we don't raise our hand, if we don't say something,
grade,
exactly. Like your grade, I mean, that's what saved me at Tufts, you know, is the more you talk, the better your grade is.
Okay.
So, I mean, you know, raise your hand, participate. You know, participation is a big side of the grade, right? Whereas in Japan, it's totally opposite. It's how much you can memorize, basically. I mean, like, you don't even have to be in class in university, as long as you pass the tests, right? I mean, it's changing, but that's the impression I have. So companies would be the same, right? So the person would feel it's proper and it's polite to be quiet in the meeting.
Interesting.
Right? So a lot of American companies or other non-Japanese companies that come to Japan would feel like, do they even have an idea? Like, do they have an opinion?
Yeah.
Yes, they do. It's just the way that opinion is expressed is totally different, and you have to like put your antenna in a whole different direction.
Interesting. Let's talk about tourists, because we see a lot of tourists coming into Japan, and to be honest, there's kind of a problem in Japan with over-tourism. For instance, there's a convenience store right close to Mount Fuji. It's beautiful. People love to take photos, post it on Instagram. But since a lot of tourists came in, they left garbage, you know, there was conflicts with the locals, and the convenience store is trying to cover some cloths to block the scenery. What's your take on that? What do you think about that situation?
Well, I mean, it's a nice challenge, right? So we have to figure out how to fix that. One way of looking at it is, isn't it great that you have so many new customers?
Right.
And all the new customers are extremely different from what you've had so far. You've had Japanese customers from so far.
Yes.
But until now. But now it's a whole new breed. So we have to figure them out. So we need to figure them out together. So that's a really positive way of looking at it. And I also think that I'm going to say it, that I don't think the Japanese English education system is good enough. I really wish it could be improved.
Yes.
I went to learn how to drive in Japan during COVID because we had a little extra time. So I decided if I'm going to learn how to drive in Japan, I'm going to go to Japanese driving school. So I went to Japanese driving school for 9 months.
Okay.
I did the whole thing. And I got my Japanese license. Like everyone else in the class is like 20 years old. I was the first non-Japanese person who'd ever gone to that school, the Kamakura driving school, right? And what I realized is that in a driving school, totally makes sense, it's true around the world, is that you study the textbook, and then you also go out on the road and you practice with the teacher. And so the teacher has a brake on his side, and he can brake it if it's dangerous or something, right? But I feel like it, in a very simplified way, the Japanese English education is only textbook. There's no chance to go practice it.
That's true.
So of course, if you see all these non-Japanese people coming to your place, putting their, garbage everywhere, crossing the road, jaywalking, making a lot of noise, you do not know how to communicate with them because you have never had a chance to practice. Right? So I feel like one thing that needs to change is how Japanese people are taught English in the very elementary school, intermediate school. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so if people can have more confidence in their communication ability, almost every visitor to Japan can understand English.
Yes.
No matter which country they're from. So if you can figure out a polite way to say, excuse me, please don't cross the road here, or, everyone's going to follow the rule.
Right.
It's a matter of communication.
As for the tourists, any advice for the tourists who's coming to Japan?
Well, in Hawaii, I recently have been really studying how Hawaii is doing the tourism thing because there's a lot of over-tourism problems in Hawaii. They're introducing a word called kuleana.
Kuleana.
It's a Hawaiian word.
What is it?
Roughly translated, it means like responsibility. The feeling of the guest is responsible as well as the host.
So both sides are responsible.
Both sides. So, they talk about responsible travel. They talk about sustainable travel, right? So we, as the visitors, also have a responsibility to understand the aesthetic and the manners and the thinking behind a lot of the rules in the country we visit. At the same time, the people in the country have a responsibility to make sure that the visitors can understand what the expectations are, right?
Right.
So I feel like there's still like a very wide space in Japan, right? So we need to, there's a lot of YouTubers, there's a lot of people who are trying to explain the rules and the manner and all that. So there's a lot of information on the web. But then when you get to the actual location, we also need people on the ground who can explain it in a friendly, nice way, what the expectations are. And visitors to Japan love Japan. They love Japan, so they don't want to mess anything up.
So we call in Japanese omotenashi.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that to our international audience? What's
Well,
omotenashi?
Yeah, I think omotenashi is best described as like Japanese style hospitality.
Yes.
Right? But the hospitality in Japan is a waiting hospitality. It's a silent hospitality. It's like, before I know it, if I was drinking some of this water, I don't even notice, and there's a refilled water right in front of me.
Even beer, you get refills, even though you don't have to ask.
It's supposed to be like you don't ask, you don't even notice. I think a lot of it comes from the tea ceremony and the beauty of...
Interesting, that's right.
Yeah, the beauty of like reading what this person needs before they really feel it, It's wonderful. But unfortunately, a Japanese person cannot read what a non-Japanese person wants because they don't know the culture that they were raised in, right? So in my opinion, this is just my opinion, the Japanese style omotenashi hospitality has to be protected 100% for sure.
Yes.
But the only way to protect it is to be able to explain it better.
Right.
Or at least explain it at all. So it can't really be a silent one. It has to be a little bit more proactive where, let's say somebody goes to a Japanese inn, ryokan, right? And there's a lot of worry about people don't know how to use the shared bath area, right? So instead of having a sign in the bath area that says, don't do this, don't do this, which is what it is now, you have a nice little book in the room that says, please go through this before you go to the bath area. Don't forget to take your towel. So you do it in where somebody can read it in privacy and don't feel embarrassed when they're naked in front of everyone, right? Right? So the omotenashi, it doesn't have to change. It just has to be expressed a little bit more clear.
I have an American friend who got omotenashi, and he had an empty glass of beer, and he was poured like every time it was empty.
Yeah.
And it was kind of uncomfortable for him because he didn't
Right.
want any more beer.
Yes.
So that also I think needs to be changed. It shouldn't be like always silent. You should sometimes maybe ask the customers. Yeah.
Yeah, like I want. Sorry, it's my request, but I want the Japanese person there to say, "Guess what? In Japan, when you finish your cup, we feel like we have to fill it up again.
Okay.
We always have to fill it up again, and we have to hold it the right way and everything.
There's a right way to hold the beer.
If you don't want more, leave it half full. If you
good
don't
advice.
want more, leave it half full. And the guy will be like, and then it's like interesting, right? Oh, and then when he looks around at the izakaya, right, at the pub, he'll see everybody doing it. And he'll see somebody's not doing it when somebody has some beer half full in their cup, right? So that's a chance to like understand a deeper Japan. It's an opportunity. Yeah.
So I think our viewers are kind of interested in maybe traveling to Japan or even working and living in Japan.
Yes, yes.
So how has living and working in Japan made your character or in your journey? How has that affected your life?
Affected my life? Well, it makes me enjoy my life because Japan is a very safe country to live in.
Right.
So, I mean, I love business, so I will work late at night, and I never have to worry about walking home by myself. I never feel afraid. So I think, especially for women entrepreneurs, Japan's a great place to have a company. The type of social interaction matches my style because even though I seem like this, I am a little bit shy, and I do like to stay home, and I'm not really a party person, and I don't really have home parties and stuff. In the US, people are always at each other's houses and stuff. Whereas in Japan, people are more like they meet at a restaurant and then they go home to their own. They don't really have a home party, is it called?
Barbecues,
No barbecues like that. And that actually matches my style a little bit more. Some of my friends feel lonely because they're never invited to people's houses. But yeah, I feel like it's a really great place to live and work. And then I go back to Hawaii to play.
Do you think it's a country for, I don't know, introverts maybe? Do you think that way? Or?
I think it's a country for people that like privacy because here, no matter where you are, you can always find privacy. Even though it seems like there's a lot of people, if you're in a cafe, even if it's really crowded, no one is going to talk to you, for sure. Like, people will give each other their space.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fun.
And also you can leave your laptop and go to the bathroom and no one take it out.
Yeah, you can. You can leave your laptop, your wallet, your phone, everything.
And if you drop a wallet, it comes back in like 2 or 3 hours. They bring it to the police box.
I was outside the other day, outside of a convenience store, and I was getting ready to cross the street. I was listening to music, and I took a receipt out of my wallet, and I didn't even notice, but the young guy who was coming towards me, he's like, like that. And when I had pulled out the receipt, a 10,000 yen note had fallen out on the ground. And he's like, and he went and picked up the 10,000.
He didn't take it by himself, and he...
No, not that everyone in the world would do that. I'm sure there's a lot of people in the world that would pick it up and send it and give it to me. But I just thought that's a good example of like this type of expectation for honesty, which I really like.
How about economic growth? Do you think Japan will start economically from now on? Do you think there's business opportunities or?
I think it's going to go through a transformation. I don't know if that's going to equal economic growth, honestly. I feel like it's just going to change. There's going to be a transformation that happens, and it might end up leading to economic growth in the future, but I think our big focus right now is raising wages. So in order to raise wages, all the companies are trying to do everything they possibly can to think about.
Yes.
And I feel like part of that is like getting more international customers, or hiring more international people, or having more international partners overseas. So in order to raise the wages for everybody in Japan, we have to build the business, right?
Right.
And the only growth for business is international. I'll say it straight. Like, there is really no growth in the domestic demand. The only growth place, the only part that's going to actually require more is the international source.
Right. So surprisingly, when we look at the charts, the Japanese wages for 30 years is literally didn't go up compared to OECD countries.
Yes, yes.
Why was that, and why is it changing right now?
Because Japanese people were fine with the safety net. There's a wonderful safety net here. If you're in a company, you have your insurance covered. It's not bad. It wasn't bad for a long time. And plus, Japan was in deflation, so prices were not that high. So people could get by, right? That's what I think. But going forward, inflation's going to come, right? Because of the weak yen. At least that's my opinion. And so in order to deal with inflation and in order to figure out what to do about this debt, the only way is to raise the wages of the individual. So in order to raise the wages of the individual, you have to figure out how to build your business. And the only way that you can build your business is to have foreign customers or foreign partners, right? So it's going to start a new cycle. It's going to be very interesting.
So Ruth Marie, we need to wrap up. Any final comments for our viewers who are maybe interested in traveling to Japan or working or living in Japan?
Well, I would say, you know, obviously people want to come to visit, so please enjoy visiting. It's a great place to visit. If you want to come and work here or live here, I'd recommend maybe coming for a month or two, just trying to figure out, you know, what you like about it. Does it match you? Does it not match you? And then possibly maybe getting an internship, or they have the types of contracts that are just for 1 year. So I 100% recommend just doing a 1-year contract to start with, and make sure you really like Japan and you like the country and you like the company, and then you can decide to continue. Yeah.
And maybe start your own company.
Oh yeah, everybody please start your own company.
Okay, Ruth Marie, thanks for joining our show.
Thank you so much.